The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
What's that I see outside our window here on Jennifer Street in beautiful Friendship Heights? Why, I see raindrops. Thank God for that. Whew. A little bit of moisture, although we're going up to over 100 degrees next week. This is wild how much heat we have had. But a little bit of rain today is going to help. We'll get into the ESPYs from last night, some really moving moments and a glitch at the end that we'll talk about. Some baseball, crazy stuff happening in Baltimore this weekend with two slumping teams in what should be a monster series. I'll get into the details of that. Kevin Durant talking to Kay Adams on Up and Adams. Said some interesting things about Jayden Daniels. Big fan, obviously, but compares him to himself. Yeah, we're going to hear that later on. Also in the next hour, and I guess this story will never be straightened out, but when they go through every year at the Super Bowl, the stupidest questions asked, the one that's always mentioned is, hey, Doug Williams, how long have you been a black quarterback? That was not the question that was asked, but the legend still continues, and Doug talks about it on a podcast that was recently done by the football team. We'll play that, and I will try to set things straight. I guess it won't actually ever happen that way because the one who asked the question has passed away, and never let facts stand in the way of a good story. It makes for a better story that the question was, how long have you been a black quarterback? But that's not what was asked, and we'll get into that and a whole lot more. Let me just get started here with the baseball, and then we'll get to the ESPYs here. The Orioles and the Yankees are playing a series this weekend, which is the series in baseball because you got a first-place team playing a second-place team. The Sunday game is going to be on Roku as Major League Baseball continues to sell off this stuff, although Roku is saying you can watch it for free. If you know how to do that on your TV, you can. If not, you watch it on your laptop, but whatever. Okay, we got that for Sunday, and then tomorrow is Fox Sports 1. It's the series. I mean, you have the Orioles leading the American League East at 57-36, very respectable record. That's the second best record in the American League and the third best record in baseball. And then you have the Yankees 2 games back, 56-39. Nothing wrong with those records. Here's the thing. They're coming into these series playing like crapola. The Yankees just lost their 8th straight series, and the Orioles were just swept by the Cubs, who are a 5th-place team and a below 500 team. They came into Camden Yards, and they swept them in 3 games, outscoring them 21-2. And the Orioles have lost 6 of their last 7, and it doesn't look promising at all for either team. But I guess, one team is going to win 2 of the games, and one team will maybe win 3 of the games, but you will have something going into the All-Star break. But I don't know if we know anything about these 2 teams. And Boston, which is starting to come a little bit, they're 10 games over 500. Maybe those 2 teams will just wash away, and Boston will wind up winning the division. But I think, with the trade deadline coming, the Yankees will have money to spend, and the Orioles may spend this year. Maybe they load up on some pitching, and things get a little more interesting. Though, when you don't score any runs like they did in the last 2 games, in fact, the back-to-back shutout by the Cubs, that's the first time since June of 2021 that Baltimore was shut out in consecutive games, and that year they won only 52 games. It's the first time that they were swept at home since August of 2021. And remember last year when the Orioles won 102 games, they didn't lose a series all year. Weren't swept in a series all year. The only time they were swept in the season was in that playoff series against the Texas Rangers, where they lost 4 straight. But that was the key to their success. Never get swept in a series, win most of the series. They did that, and they had a great season. Not that they won't have a great season this year. They had 57 wins. I mean, they could tickle 100 again this year. May not get there, but, they could still win the division. And who knows? Once you get into the playoffs, you never know what's going to happen, and maybe they can go a lot further than they did last year, maybe even to the World Series. But right now, you got this enormous series between these marquee teams, no bigger marquee team than the Yankees, and they both are playing like garbage right now. So we'll find out what happens tonight as they get underway, and we've got the coverage here beginning at 6 o'clock. All right, let me get to the ESPYs from last night. It was Serena Williams who was the host of the show. They armed her with plenty of jokes, including this one about Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark had an amazing year and is nominated for 3 awards. Caitlin, you are the Larry Bird in that you are an amazing player. You have ties to Indiana, and white people are really crazy about you.
Yeah, and it's a joke for the purposes of that show, but, it's a little bit too close to the nerve because this has become an issue sparked by Angel Reese and others, and that the feeling among some of the other WNBA players is that there's too much attention on Caitlin Clark, and is it because she's white? Now, Serena made a comparison to Larry Bird and used the Indiana connection there, and that Bird is from Indiana, played at Indiana State, and is white. Caitlin Clark is white. But she has also been very beneficial to the black players in the WNBA as well, and to fans of the game of all color. So, yeah, it's a joke, but, there's a lot of truth in that too, and I think you have to look at it in a way that, maybe Serena might be staying away from those kind of things when she's attempting to elevate women's sports. And if you want to keep ripping on Caitlin Clark, go ahead, but the television numbers are showing you that people are watching her games, and it's not all white players playing in those games. So it's not necessarily just white people that have been attracted to what she's been able to do. It's people of all color and are watching a lot more WNBA than they used to. Now, you remember Diana Taurasi, who said when Caitlin Clark was about to come into the WNBA that a reckoning is coming, that, it's not going to be the same as it was in college. And it hasn't been. She's had to struggle, but she's gotten better. She's played better as time has gone on. And they played against each other a couple of weeks ago, and the Indiana Fever won against Diana Taurasi's Phoenix Mercury. And she was a little bit more complimentary about Caitlin Clark at that time. Now, here's an interesting thing. Taurasi has missed the last 2 games and is expected to miss tonight's game, which is against the Indiana Fever. So we won't get to see them play against each other again. On top of that, it brings up the question whether Diana Taurasi will be ready for the Paris Olympics, which are a little more than 2 weeks away. They can replace a player as late as July 29th, which is the first game when Team USA plays plays Japan in France, and they could make that change then. So they'll probably wait as long as possible. But wouldn't it be ironic, with all the hubbub about Caitlin Clark being left off the Olympic team, if she replaces the player who kind of lit the grenade when she came into the WNBA that the reckoning is coming? Okay, so that's something to keep an eye on. That's a story. As far as the speeches and the awards, there were some really great things that happened last night at the ESPYs, and this event really goes back. It goes back over 30 years, and the seminal moment was really at the beginning when Jim Valvano, who was dying of cancer, there was question whether he could even get there to deliver the speech, and he delivered a speech which I think rivals the Lou Gehrig luckiest man speech, the never give up speech. And he said, I don't know how much time I have left, but I'm going to dedicate it to trying to beat cancer. And they have raised millions and millions of dollars off the V Foundation, and there have been a number of people who have said the research that they did from the money that was raised helped to save their lives, including one of Valvano's daughters, that she was treated for a form of cancer which didn't have a cure until they were able to develop that. So it's a great thing that they do, and they have turned it into kind of the Academy Awards for sports, but there are many, moving moments in this. And the top moment in the night is the giving out of the Arthur Ashe Courage Award. It's been 10 years since Stuart Scott won the award. He passed away, sadly, at the age of 49. Others have been survivors and have beaten cancer. Dick Vitale is battling it again, but he was given the award, and he has raised millions and millions of dollars for cancer research for children. So there's been great things that have happened. But last night they gave it to Steve Gleason, who was the Saints safety and was the one that blocked the punt in that first Monday night game after Katrina and really kind of elevated the city. He has been living with ALS for 13 years now, which is really remarkable. I had a really close friend who passed away of ALS. He lived about 2.5 years. Was older when he was diagnosed, but here was Steve Gleason in his 30s and still living. He cannot speak. He cannot move any part of his body. He's on a ventilator, but he is living the best life he can with his wife and 2 children. The older one, Rivers, the son, was standing by him last night as he got the Arthur Ashe Courage Award, and it was given to him by his former teammate Drew Bledsoe, the longtime quarterback for the Saints, and he was able to type out in advance his speech on what they call an eye gaze, and it's a very, very tedious process where you find a letter with your eye, you blink, that letter gets put on the page, and you can type out sentences, but it takes a long time to communicate. I know this. I saw this firsthand with my friend. This was his life in his final months. But he's been doing this for a long time, and I'm sure that this speech, which he delivered last night, which lasts about a little less than 4 minutes, probably took him hours and hours and hours to painstakingly type out on the eye gaze. So he stood up there with his son. He was presented with the Arthur Ashe Courage Award by his former teammate Drew Bledsoe, and this was the speech that played off of his eye gaze machine.
Thanks, Drew. I love you. Hi there, everyone. Hi, Gray and Mama, and thanks for your help, Rivers. This award, the Arthur Ashe Award for Courage, is a sublime honor for me, and I always love the opportunity to wear my tuxedo. Arthur Ashe exemplified courage as living with an open heart of humility, kindness, and generosity, which united humanity. So to receive this award is amazing. When I learned I was receiving this award, I started reflecting on what that word, courage, means. To be courageous, we must first experience loneliness, unworthiness, or any of the faces of fear. I was told I would have 3 years to live when I was diagnosed with ALS in 2011, so I've got the wilderness of fear tattooed all over me. For me, this honor represents some encouragement and triumph for the families currently living with ALS, all the people living with disabilities or other illnesses, and all of you who experience fear or suffering. I suppose if you have never experienced fear, isolation, or suffering, you can roll your sanctified ass right out of here. The truth is, no human is immune from fear or adversity, not even super athletes, royal princes, or the most holy saints. Considering this truth of our humanity, it's vital that we all, individually and collectively, discover ways to be courageous and love the life we have. My view is that the fears and adversities we encounter are our opportunity to accept what is and explore what is on the other side of fear, to grow stronger, better, and have peace of mind. From this perspective, resiliently moving through the adversities life brings us is our purpose in being human. It's clear to me that our ability to courageously share our vulnerabilities with each other is our greatest strength. By doing this, we're able to understand the issue, compassionately collaborate with each other to solve problems, and overcome fear. Without the understanding and compassionate support from my family, community, and caregivers, I'd have been dead years ago. Through this lens, you can see we're all in this together. We are all citizens of the world. Given our interconnectedness, the greatest aspect of our purpose is to generously help, serve, and love others. Do we have the courage to unconditionally love our neighbors, our so-called enemies, and love ourselves? I don't think anyone will disagree that we face enormous challenges in the 21st century. If we can courageously share our fears and limitations with each other and compassionately collaborate to solve problems, our human potential is boundless. If we can listen, understand, and help alleviate each other's suffering, then truly all things are possible. Thank you again for this incredible honor. I love y'all.
That's Steve Gleason last night getting the Arthur Ashe Courage Award. Shohei Ohtani of the Dodgers, Best Major League Player. Connor McDavid of the Stanley Cup runner-up Edmonton Oilers, Best NHL Player. Luka Doncic of Dallas, Best NBA Player. Best Men's Sports Athlete Patrick Mahomes also won the Best NFL Player. And Cooper Flagg was the winner of the Gatorade National Player of the Year, along with track and field athlete Sadie Engelhardt of Ventura, California. He's so good that, and we're going to hear this from Jim Boeheim, that he might have been good enough to be on the Olympic team, and he hasn't played a college game yet. We'll get to that. The only other thing to mention from this, and I certainly was not up at the end of this, but they had a problem at the end because there's what they call a hard out on ABC. This is not a problem on ESPN, but you got to get to the local news. And what happened is ABC returned from a commercial break and repeated presentations from two earlier awards, and Serena Williams was supposed to say goodbye, but that was cut off. The final credits were cut off, and they were able to fix that for the Mountain Time in the West Coast, but that's how it worked in the East and the Central Time. But otherwise, some great things last night, some great awards, and as you heard, I think a very moving speech from Steve Gleason as he won the Arthur Ashe Awards. All right, coming up in the next hour, Tony and Mike on the Paul Skenes situation, what the manager said about taking him out after 7 no-hit innings. Nolan Ryan must get a chuckle out of that. And also what Kevin Durant said to Kay Adams about what he thinks of Jayden Daniels. That and a whole lot more as we continue with the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. So every year at the Super Bowl, when they list the stupidest questions ever asked, it's always on the list. Doug Williams, how long have you been a black quarterback? That's not the question that was asked, yet it lives on in urban legend, and we'll try to straighten that out before the end of the hour. Nick Saban got an award last night at the ESPYs, said some very eloquent things, which we will play. And Kevin Durant weighing in on the new quarterback for his favorite football team, has really some nice things to say about Jayden Daniels, and wait till you hear the comparison that he makes. We'll get to that and a whole lot more as we wait for Tony coming up at 11 o'clock, and we wait for my vacation to begin in exactly 1 hour. So looking forward to that. So yesterday afternoon, Paul Skenes, who is the rookie sensation, the latest phenom to come along in baseball, much as we had Steven Strasburg back in 2010, so it's 14 years ago. Paul Skenes, since he's been brought up by the Pittsburgh Pirates, he's had 11 starts. He's 6-0. His ERA is 1.90. And yesterday, pitching against the Brewers, it was in Milwaukee, which is where the Nats are tonight. He threw 99 pitches, 65 for strikes, and he left without giving up a hit. His manager said that the reason, Derek Shelton is his name, the reason that he took him out was he was tired. He said his stuff didn't look the same. His stuff hadn't given up a freaking hit. What do you mean his stuff didn't look the same? Now, it's a 1-0 game, okay. Nobody throws a complete game anymore. 99 pitches is almost always the limit. He had 2 innings to complete the no-hitter, not 1. So, a lot of arguments can be made for taking him out of the game. But my God, Nolan Ryan has to be just laughing at this. He would routinely throw 160. I think in one game he threw something like 235 pitches. He pitched until he was 46 years old, and he threw what did he throw? 7 no-hitters, right? 6 no-hitters, whatever. Yeah, I think it was 7 no-hitters because I was at number 5. And I'm like, God, that's got to be it. But yeah, he would stay in, and there's a famous story about Ryan about to be yanked from a game. I forget who the manager was, but he wasn't pitching well, and the manager came up and he said, and Ryan said to him, he said, "Yeah, I know, I suck today." He said, "But I'm better than anybody else you got in that bullpen, so get the hell off my mound." Skenes, rookie, can't do that. And then, he's a guy who's got to be protected, number 1 pick of the draft, all that. But he's a guy who throws 102 miles an hour. I mean, it's just remarkable and doesn't even look like he's throwing hard. So this was Tony and Pablo Torre, who was in for Mike Wilbon yesterday on PTI, analyzing what happened yesterday afternoon in Milwaukee.
Because the Pirates' rookie ace has pitched 7 no-hit innings. This afternoon against the Brewers, he struck out 11, and then manager Derek Shelton pulled him after those 99 pitches, scuttling his chance at a no-hitter. So was Shelton right to pull Paul Skenes, Tony?
He's right long-term and he's right short-term. By pulling him out now with all the attention on this kid, he makes him even more of a legend. He's been in the bigs for 3 months, I believe, right? He's 6-0. He's got a 1.90 ERA. He now has 89 strikeouts in 66 1/3 innings. He's part myth. He's part legend. He's Roy Hobbs. He's Fernando Valenzuela. He's Caitlin Clark. He needs to start in the All-Star game. This only makes him larger than he was before.
Yeah, but no pressure or anything. If he's Caitlin Clark and Roy Hobbs and every other mythical dragon you can imagine. Tony, the story here is that the starting pitcher as a phenomenon has been on the decline for a while. You have to go back to, I think, a personal regret of yours, the fact that you spent all of that time rooting for Steven Strasburg to get to somebody who engendered this kind of hype and fame. But you go back to Kerry Wood, you go back to Doc Gooden, and on and on and on. Paul Skenes is one of these creatures that has to be protected in the modern game. And so when you have this tension here about protection, this endangered species, and also the face potentially of pitching in baseball, Tony, I want to make something clear. This guy is going to be the thing at the All-Star game happening on Tuesday. And so when you think about how his team, the Pirates, is managing him, of course they're going to pull him because they pull every pitcher nowadays if they get through 7, even if there have been no-hit innings. But then you get to, okay, are we going to see him be the star? We'll even take the mound at the All-Star game, too.
Oh, I can't imagine that he's not going to start the All-Star game. He can't predict. It's 1 inning. And everybody wants to see him. I won't say everybody. I certainly want to see him pitch against Aaron Judge. And it's a 1-inning thing, and he'd be warming up in a bullpen during that layover time anyway. So I don't think that that's going to hurt him. Normally, I would mind that a manager pulled him. But again, in his particular case, I think it adds to the legend. I'm going to give you this one statistic. There's only 2 pitchers in history to have multiple outings of 11-plus strikeouts and give up no hits. Only 2. There's Nolan Ryan and this kid. All right, that's pretty rare company, pretty rare air. Very impressive.
Tony,
let's move now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to ask you, the no-hitter has also become so common recently. I wonder if that factors into this too, right? The whole idea here is that Paul Skenes is going for a bigger game, a bigger accomplishment even, and that just requires him to be healthy. And so risk aversion, when it's diluted, when the accomplishment when you got preempted from has been diluted, I get why teams are more willing to do this than ever. That's just the point I wanted to make.
I think it makes it a bigger deal. Just like when there's a bad call at first and a perfect game is lost, everybody remembers that one and not the others.
Yeah, people will remember this. And the stat that Tony threw out there, I think it deserves even more emphasis. Only 2 pitchers in history with multiple 11 strikeout or more performances and no hits given up. 2 guys, Nolan Ryan and a rookie who's made 11 starts. Nolan Ryan pitched until he was 46 years old. Nolan Ryan pitched forever. He was part of the '69 Mets. He didn't leave baseball until, I think, 1997 was his last year. I mean, you're talking about, the difference between, like a pebble on the beach and the beach almost. It's like unbelievable that this guy is doing this. Now, the one thing that you have to look at in baseball today is how long does this last? And we saw this with Steven Strasburg. Threw hard. Now, the one thing about Strasburg, there were even at the time, even before he tore the elbow ligament, which required the Tommy John surgery as a rookie, there were some who questioned his delivery. The delivery that you see from Paul Skenes, that looks very smooth. Strasburg threw that hard. He threw some pitches 100 miles an hour. But he always looked like he was laboring, and even when he came back from the Tommy John surgery, I remember we had Tommy John on the air, and he said he better change his delivery or he's going to get hurt again. He'd never needed a second Tommy John, but boy, did he have injuries. The one year he didn't get hurt, that was the big bonanza year where he made every start, and he started in the World Series and relieved as well and was the MVP of the series, causing him to get that contract, which paid him $240 million, and I think he pitched 33 innings after that. But with Paul Skenes, enjoy it while you can. Hope it lasts a long time. Hope he has a Nolan Ryan type of career. Maybe certain guys are just built to do this and are durable, but in modern baseball, they baby him. And it would have been absolutely laughable if in the 1970s or 1980s, when Nolan Ryan is cruising along throwing a no-hitter, and they take him out because he's thrown too many pitches. That would have been a joke. But this is the way baseball is played now, and the analytics told them that he looked tired. How did he look tired? Hadn't given up a hit. He threw, of the 99 pitches, 65 were for strikes. How many of those got away from him because he was tired? But that's baseball now. And I'll get to, in a little bit, what Phil Mushnick wrote about hitting. Remember the famous Mendoza line? You may have to be older to remember that, but he's got some thoughts, some old man thoughts on that. Meantime, back to the ESPYs, which aired last night on ABC, which led to a bit of an issue because they had the hard out, as they call it in the business, for the news at 11:30, and certain things got cut off on the East Coast and the Central Time Zone. They were able to fix it for the Mountain Time and the West Coast, but it was very moving. I played in the last hour the speech that Steve Gleason gave through his eye gaze machine. One of the things they did with Gleason before he lost his voice, the ALS, which he's been battling since 2011. He was able to speak for a long time. Now he's on a ventilator. But before his voice went away, and that's what ALS does, it basically shuts down your body. On the vocal cord muscles are all gone. Before that, they recorded his voice, and so they were able to synthesize his own voice. And if you haven't seen it or heard it, you can look it up on YouTube. It's very well done. And he's on stage with his son Rivers, and he gets the Arthur Ashe Courage Award from his former teammate Drew Bledsoe. Very good. The other awards, the big awards for the sports, awards, not the inspirational awards, but Shohei Ohtani of the Dodgers, best baseball player, Connor McDavid of Edmonton, best hockey player, Luka Doncic of Dallas, best NBA player, Patrick Mahomes, best NFL, also the best male athlete. And then Cooper Flagg and a woman by the name of Sadie Engelhart won the Gatorade National Players of the Year. You're going to hear about Cooper Flagg. He is going to Duke, and right now is the expected number one overall pick in next year's NBA draft. But we also had Nick Saban getting the Leadership Award, as he has now retired from Alabama, retired at the end of the season. And I pulled out a couple of things from his speech, which I found very compelling. This is about not just being a head coach, but having so many people involved in what you do, and as a leader, how he gave credit to all of them as he received the award.
When you talk about iconic players like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or Serena Williams, it was all because of what they did. It was their points. It was their wins. But when you talk about iconic coaches, it's all about how did you represent your team? How did your team represent you? Think about John Wooden and the success that he had for years. Coach Bryant, the success that he had. Don Staley, who's an icon coach in my mind for what she's been able to accomplish at Women's South Carolina. So I can attest to you what it takes to build a team. You have to have great players and appreciate the way they compete. You have to have really good coaches who help develop the players. You have to have really good support personnel who sit the table so that the players can compete. You have to have great mentors, which I've had great mentors who taught me how I could teach players and how I could inspire learning in players so that they could actually be all that they could be. And you have to have great support from your family. Miss Terry's been the love of my life for 52 years, and she has supported me in every way as my family has. And I certainly appreciate that because there's a lot of sacrifices families make in coaching. We actually moved 17 times before we ever got to Alabama. 17 times. So I can only accept this award on behalf of all the other folks that contributed to it, which there's 1,000 of them. And every time I look at this, I'm going to see the faces of all the people who work so hard to help us be successful and the relationships that we're able and forged in those teams that made it so special.
That's part one from Nick Saban. Then the wrap-up where he tells it's not an Alabama story. It's an LSU story, and it involves Jesse Jackson. This is one that I didn't really see coming.
Sports bring people together better than anything. When we won the national championship in 2003 at LSU, I had Jesse Jackson came in and speak to the team. And he said to me, your team on a Saturday night in Tiger Stadium is closer to the kingdom of God than my church. I said, Jesse, you ever been in LSU Stadium on a Saturday night? You can smell the bourbon on the 50-yard line. And he said, no. He said, everybody has the same goal. The rules are clearly defined, and everybody's together in spirit. So we all have a responsibility and obligation to bring people together because our platform in sports can do that for so many folks. So help someone, bring people together. God bless you, and thank you very much.
And that's Nick Saban getting the Leadership Award. And, yeah, you wouldn't think of it that way. I have never been to an LSU night game, but the stories are legendary. It's not just the 100,000 people that are in the stadium. It's the 100,000 who don't have tickets, who aren't going to get in the stadium and just want to be a part of the happening. But that would be Jesse Jackson's point, is that how many times in anything in life do you get that many people together to do the same thing and have the same goal in mind? I imagine there's some visitor fans at LSU, although they probably have to kind of stay incognito and be quiet. But, yeah, there's really nothing like that. And college football, for that matter, at that level, that's as big as it gets. We have Maryland football around here, which is kind of fun and quaint, and, they get some decent crowds at times. But, boy, football in the SEC at places like Alabama and Georgia and LSU for sure, Texas A&M now, and now Texas and Oklahoma joining. That is unreal, and however big it can get in the NFL, and there's some playoff games that it's crazy, and we even had people getting frostbite being at that Chiefs playoff game this past year. It's nothing like the unbelievable fever and fury that takes place when you get together for college football. So Nick Saban, I think he's going to miss that. I think even though he's in his 70s, still looks great. But he made the decision to retire and was honored last night at the ESPYs. Interesting, the ESPYs used to be, first they had them at the All-Star break for the NBA. And I remember they were in New York. And one year, I actually did the backstage stuff, which was really cool. Tony Bruno was supposed to do it. He had to go home. So they asked me to step in, and it was incredible. I talked to here people just off the top of my head. that I talked to. One of them was Joe Namath. Another one was Conan O'Brien, he was kind of an up-and-comer then, but still, pretty well-known. And the big one I remember was John Elway. And John Elway had just won his first Super Bowl. That was the one where they beat the Packers in San Diego. And he had said prior to that season, because he was, getting up there, he'd played already about 15 years before he played in that Super Bowl. He said, if I don't win one, my career will still be complete. He played in 3 of them, lost all of them, lost to the Giants, got clobbered by the Redskins, got clobbered by the 49ers. And he said, my career will be complete. And I asked him about that. I said, had you not won that Super Bowl, would you still feel that way? He said, I'd have kept playing until I won one. He said, I lied. I thought that was a lot of fun. So that was when they had it at the All-Star break for basketball. Then it was moved to the All-Star break for baseball. They would have it the night after the All-Star game. And now they have it a week before or a few days before the All-Star game. I guess it doesn't matter anymore. There's always, sports happening. The WNBA is getting bigger, so that's, taking more attention and things like that. But that used to be, at one time in sports, those were the 3 nights of the year where you had nothing. You had the day before the All-Star game, the day after the All-Star game, and Christmas Eve. And that's all, gone by the wayside. And now they go out of their way to schedule games on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day because they know people are going to be home watching them on television. And who cares about the people who go to the games, because they certainly don't. Coming up, what Kevin Durant said about Jayden Daniels, the quarterback for his favorite football team. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock today, and I will be heading off on vacation after the show today, so I got a week off coming up. Looking forward to that, and then kind of the stretch run. I've got some days off in August as well, but once we roll into football season, really don't like to take any time off, so getting it in now. We was just talking about the Paul Skenes 7 innings of no-hit pitching yesterday as the Pirates beat the Brewers 1-0. Skenes has made 11 starts. He's 6-0. His ERA is 1.90. He's on the All-Star team. Probably will be the starter because he's going to be well rested. And the comment from the manager that they took him out because he looked tired. How did he look tired? 65 of 99 pitches, strikes. He didn't give up a hit. What told you that? I guess they have some analytics that look at spin rate and Michigas like that, whatever it is. I mean, okay, it's old man ranting. And here's more. Phil Mushnick, who's even older than I am, writing about something that I've talked about before. I don't really understand what batting average means anymore. And maybe those of us who grew up watching baseball where we always looked at the 3 numbers. It was batting average, it was home runs, and it was runs batted in. And that was the Triple Crown. That's what we were trained to learn was the top 3 stats to look at for a hitter. And it's not anymore. You go, WAR, OBS, OPS, velo. You got to be a mathematician to understand it now. So Mushnick notes that this past Sunday, more than 40 major league players were in the lineup despite batting below 200. Cubs outfielder Pete Crow Armstrong just missed the cut. He was batting 200. These were all guys below 200. In the Tigers-Reds game, there were 7. There were 6 in the Angels-Cubs game, 5 in the Royals-Rockies, and another 5 in the Brewers-Dodgers, which was a battle of first-place teams. He says, not too long ago, those who hit under 200 were gone or retired by early May at the latest. Well, now you have to consider their home runs to strikeout ratios. Joey Gallo, who's hurt right now, not playing for the Nats, and he's got a pretty serious hamstring injury. He may not even be back till August. Who knows? But he is striking out 50% of his at-bats. He's batting 164, does have 7 home runs, and is playing for his 6th team in the last 5 years and got a $5 million contract this year. That's not a ton of money, but the guy who strikes out half the time and hits 164, that's what he gets. And, we used to call this, the 200, the Mendoza line. Mario Mendoza, journeyman player. I guess he was a pretty good infielder, must have been, was always hitting about 200. So, and this doesn't exist anymore, but when the Sunday paper came, they listed all the batting averages of the National League players and the American League players. And, you take that to the reading room, to the stall, and spend some time perusing the numbers. And, that was our internet as a kid. You'd look forward to the Sunday paper, and you'd see the batting averages, and the Mendoza line was always like around 200. And sure enough, you'd see Mario Mendoza. I think he spent some time with Texas and maybe a couple of other teams. And then you'd look at the numbers below him and above him. And if anybody was hitting below the Mendoza line, he probably wasn't long for the major leagues. And anybody above him, it'd have to be significantly above him to have some security of staying there. And now it just doesn't matter. If you hit home runs, if you have some other measurables which they like, or you can get on base, who cares what your batting average is? And to stay in the lineup with a batting average under 200 is remarkable. And not just that, but that you have that many players of 18 players in a game, 7, 6, 5 between first place teams. More than a quarter of the hitters in the game are hitting below 200. It's crazy. I guess it makes like my buddy Zabe says about athletes. I guess it makes sense to them, and somebody spent a lot of time figuring this out, and it makes sense to them. But as a fan, you don't know what to look at anymore. Speaking of fans, Kevin Durant, big fan of the Washington football team, has been seen on the sidelines of games, likes to go to practices and training camp, now part of the Olympic team, hoping to be healthy enough to play once the games get going in a couple of weeks. He was on the Up and Adams podcast, which is done by Kay Adams, who used to work for the NFL Network, and she seems to have a pretty good relationship with a lot of athletes. And she had KD on yesterday. They talked a lot about basketball, but also they talked about his favorite football team and the quarterback that he hopes will develop into a star one day.
I feel like you're the reason they drafted Jayden Daniels. Like, how often were you texting Magic Johnson saying, "This is what I want. Here are my thoughts for my ideas"?
I might have shot a couple texts out there. I was a fan of the Heisman winner this past year. And it feels like he's like the KD of college football last year with his body type, So you watch him on TV, it's easy to watch their team because of how he plays. And so hopefully he brings that same type of, enthusiasm to the game, to Washington. Everybody's rallying around him. We feel like we got a player that can take us somewhere now.
You just gave me a great soundbite that he's the KD of Washington. Tell me more. What do you mean by that? Body type? What do you mean?
Yeah, I felt like he pops off the screen. When you turn on your TV, a guy that size that can move that well at that position, you tend to look at that body frame as like a wide receiver or a skill position, but to command the offense, being able to move the football up the field as a quarterback, that was impressive to see. So I didn't really know Jayden as much before this past season. And then I started watching him more, and I'm like, wow, he really impressed me by just, first of all, you can tell he loves football. And then secondly, you tell he's been working at football since he was a kid, so all that stuff I can see through the TV.
Have you reached out to him?
Yeah, we talked a couple times. I'm going to go hopefully I get to check out training camp or maybe the first game of the season.
You'll be busy. I think you're going to be in, at some brasserie in Paris eating steak frites or something during training camp.
I know. I think the first day of camp was maybe a couple of weeks from now.
I'll FaceTime you in. We'll do
make sure you do that.
I'm going. You were here last year. I thought that was insane. I bet if you're Jayden Daniels, you have Kevin Durant texting you. I can't even imagine what that means. And you played football. Is it true? I couldn't really get a straight answer. Did you play tight end at one point?
Yeah, I did. And that took me right to the basketball court. That first catch over the middle, it took me. I picked up a basketball after that. Football is my first sport, which is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, Austin Rivers started this whole debate a couple months ago. Are you one of the 30 NBA players who could play in the NFL?
I need probably a little bit longer training than some other guys. But yeah, I feel like I can do anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're that good at what you do, sure, you feel like you can do anything. That's Kevin Durant with Kay Adams. The Austin Rivers statement that there are 30 guys who play in the NBA who could play in the NFL, and I think he said almost nobody could play in the NBA, which is probably true, but 30 guys playing in the NFL, that's really a stretch. And, speaking of stretch, what position is a 7'2" guy going to play in the NFL? And Kevin Durant, has had all kinds of injuries playing basketball. It's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen at 36. And it's never going to happen. It's just, speculation. But, he loves football. He loves to watch it. I don't know, because they got a lot of minority partners. I don't know if he has a share of the team or shares of the team. I know at one time he wanted to be an investor, and probably will wind up doing that, and has a relationship enough with Magic Johnson that he's texting him and telling him to take Jayden Daniels. I don't think that that played a big role. I think that the football people really understood that, but he did call him the KD of college football, not the KD of Washington, but the KD of college football, because of the way he plays quarterback. Now, you hope that if he is the KD of football, that, he's going to go down as one of the all-time greats. But also, you have to recognize that KD has missed a lot of time because of injury. But, he really has created some excitement, and good for him for jumping on board that. And those are the thoughts of Kevin Durant, who I guess won't be able to make it to training camps. He's going to be involved in the Olympics. They will break camp, I'm thinking, probably mid-August, because they get started with the rookies on the 18th, and then the veterans are due, I think it's the 24th. And I think training camp now only lasts about 3 or 4 weeks, and it's so much different than it used to be. When they played 14 games, the off-season was the off-season. You may have done some light jogging around the neighborhood. A lot of guys didn't lift weights in those days. And you showed up in early July, and you sweated out these two-a-days where you would hit all the time, and you had 6 exhibition games and 14 regular season games. By the time you got to the regular season, you'd been in training camp like a month and a half, actually over 2 months, because the training camp, as I remember, would sometimes start like right after the 4th of July. And it would stretch into the start of the season, which in those days was mid-September, because you're only playing 14 games. And now, it's like 3 weeks. They do have the off-season program and the mandatory minicamp, and nobody shows up in training camp to get in shape. You're expected to be in shape when you get there. So that's a lot different. But it's heading in the direction, and we heard this week from guys like the Joe Burrow, Cincinnati quarterback, who's basically said, they're going to go to 18, and we're going to need an extra week. We need 2 bye weeks, and one of them is going to be a week off for everybody, hoping. But that's where that's going. So it's going to 18 games. That's going to happen. That's 4 more than they used to play, 2 more than they used to play for years and years. The 17th was added because it was the owners saying, okay, we're going to do 18, but since you're kicking and fussing, we'll give you 17 now and then go at 18. But that's going to happen. There's just too much money that's sitting out there for the owners to gobble up with more product, and it's going to go to 18 games. Bill Belichick, update on him. He has signed up for Inside the NFL, which, if this has been off your radar for a while, it's understandable. This was an early HBO show. This was a show when almost nobody had HBO, like early 70s. And it was Hank Stram. No, let's see. No, it wasn't Hank Stram. Was it Hank Stram? No. It was Nick Buoniconti, and it was Len Dawson. They hosted it in the early years by themselves. And then Chris Collinsworth, I think, started to join them while he was still playing, and then segued into the third guy on that show. Years went by. They added different people. I think it stayed on HBO for a long time. Then it went to Showtime. And now it's on the CW. Well, the CW is huffing and puffing as like trying to be a sports network. I've never watched it, but I guess they got the Live Tour now. It's known mostly for cartoons. But here's the show now. It's Ryan Clark, Chad Johnson, and Chris Long, 3 ex-players, one of the great broadcasters ever did this for years and years. JB, James Brown, hosted this show for a long, long time. They have gone the route of making Ryan Clark like the guy, the traffic cop, the guy that runs the show. And Chad Johnson, very compelling. Chris Long has his own podcast. And now they're adding Bill Belichick. Well, you got three guys doing this who are, I think, all under, well, Johnson may be over 40, but and Clark maybe is over 40. Maybe they're all in their early 40s. And here's Bill Belichick, 72 years old, but running around with a 24-year-old girlfriend going to Taylor Swift concerts. He's going to be part of this, and he said, I'm thrilled to join my new team at NFL Films and work on such a historic television franchise. I've always appreciated inside the NFL's depth of analysis and yada, yada, yada. I don't think it's on most people's radar now. Here's my thoughts on Belichick. He probably could have joined one of these mainstream shows. He could have joined the Fox pregame, the CBS. He is on the Pat McAfee show as a regular. I guess he's going to be on like Mondays to talk about the weekend. And he's also going to be on the Manning cast. I don't know if every week, but these are two cutting edge things. And I think this is a way of Belichick saying, hey, I'm still young. He wants another shot. He may never, as great as he's been with the 6 Super Bowls, he may never be a head coach again. But I think he's moving as much away from his age as he possibly can. I think he's looking at, how people are going to view him. And while it does seem odd to be dating someone young enough to be his granddaughter, maybe that fits as part of the image. I still got it. I'm still young enough to step in. I know all the coaches around the league, they're all looking for guys under 40. But I can still do this at 72, and look at me hanging with a very young woman and also sitting alongside some young men doing television. McAfee, who's not 40 yet, the Manning cast, which is two guys in their 40s who have won Super Bowls and do things in a way that's not conventional. And now he's joining a show with a bunch of young folks. I think there's some method to this madness. I think this is what Bill Belichick is all about. He wants to show people that he is actually younger than he is chronologically. Let's put it that way. All right, coming up, I want to get to this Doug Williams statement that he made on a podcast. It's the team is putting together, I guess, on a regular basis, they're going to do these. This is the first one that I'm aware of, but it's called Hail Tales. And it's about a half-hour podcast put together about the Super Bowl that Doug Williams won in San Diego in January of '88. I was there for this. I was not there for the question that lingers all these years later, and what I think it continues to be a myth that is propagated in this podcast by Doug Williams. But I'll go through what he said and what I believe was the actual question asked as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony's coming up at 11. So the 3 Super Bowls that Washington won are each significant in their own way. First one in January of '83 stands out for the greatest play in the history of the franchise, the 4th-and-1 touchdown run by John Riggins, which cemented the game and delivered the first Super Bowl championship for the Redskins. You kind of want to forget about the second one they played in the next year, or actually the third one for the franchise, but the consecutive one that they played the next year, and they got just housed by the Raiders 38-9. And then the last Super Bowl that they won, 1991, when they start to rank the greatest Super Bowl teams of all time, you'll often see that team at the top of the list. They were that good. They were dominant. They rolled through the playoffs, took care of Atlanta and Detroit with ease, and they won, I think, by only 2 touchdowns over the Bills, but there were a couple of garbage TDs for Buffalo in that game. That was a complete shellacking that they had in that. The one in the middle is significant historically because Doug Williams became the first African-American quarterback to start a Super Bowl and, of course, the first to win one. And on top of that, he set a record in the second quarter, which still stands. He threw 4 touchdown passes. It was an unbelievable game. It unfolded like it was going to be a disaster for Washington. They fell behind 10-0. Williams sprained his knee. Jay Schrader came in for a couple of plays, got sacked. You didn't know if Williams was going to be able to come back, but he came back in and started raining touchdown passes. And on top of that, Timmy Smith ran for over 200 yards, a record which still stands. I mean, this was just an unbelievable offensive display by Washington, and they probably could have named the final score. I think it was 42-10 was the final. They could have scored 62 points the way that game was going, just gaping holes for Smith to run through and wide receivers running open. But that game isn't necessarily remembered for what he did on the field, though it is significant. When we talk about the stupid questions of Super Bowls, this one is always mentioned. And there's a new podcast that's put out by the team, put out by the Commanders. It's called Hail Tales, and it focuses on that Super Bowl, which was played in San Diego, and I was there. And they talk about a variety of things that went on, including the Dexter Manley news conference. And if you watch the Dexter Football Life, you'll see me standing next to him when he's sweating and screaming about wanting his questions to be put in writing when he couldn't read at the time. I mean, there were all kinds of things that went on with that. But what is remembered is this question that was, I say allegedly, although this is Doug Williams talking about it, a question that was asked of him in the lead up to the Super Bowl.
You know, I had no problem with the media as long as they was asking civilized questions and things like that. And, you know, it was only one question that came up. And to be honest with you, it did not bother me.
The question, how long have you been a black quarterback?
I knew the guy who asked the question. He was originally from Jackson, Mississippi, who covered Grambling and Jackson State during that time. His name is Butch Jones. Since then, Butch Jones, bless his soul, has passed away. But Butch Jones called me before he passed. He was telling me all the medical issues that he was having. But he told me he appreciated the way I handled the question, because what he asked me was, you know, how long I had been a black quarterback. And the way it came out, and I told him, you know, since I left Grambling, and that was the truth. But I knew what he was trying to say, and I wasn't gonna make him look bad or anything like that, because I understood where he was coming from. And I just said, hey, you know, since I left Grambling, that's when I became a black quarterback.
All right, I love Doug Williams. I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's a fine man. But if you look into this, it's not the question that was asked. And this was at a time where people didn't have smartphones. Nowadays, reporters almost always record everything while they're doing interviews. In those days, there may have been a few who had tape recorders, but no audio has ever been found of this. There was no television camera that was running at the time. As far as I know, there's not a radio reporter who recorded this, and if he or she did, the tape has never been found. The reporter's name that Doug refers to as Butch Jones is actually Butch John. He has passed away. Butch John, John. He worked for the Clarion Sports Ledger. He was young. He was 34 years old. He was covering his first Super Bowl, but he had been on the job for quite some time. He'd been at the Clarion Ledger for a number of years, and before that had covered Doug Williams at Grambling, where, by the way, he was a black quarterback. He wasn't a black quarterback in the NFL, but he was a black quarterback playing at Grambling, and a lot of teams shied away from him at the time because the stigma was still there. And it was Joe Gibbs, who was an assistant coach with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that convinced management that they should take him in the first round, which they did. And within 2 years, they got to the NFC Championship game. So, you know, there was a time when Doug Williams was a black quarterback, and it was before he got to Washington. It was, you know, also in Tampa, USFL, and when he played at Grambling, where Doug John, not Doug Jones, but Doug John covered him. And so he came to the Super Bowl, and he saw all the fuss being made about Doug Williams being a black quarterback. And since he had covered football at historically black colleges like Grambling, he understood that there were plenty of black quarterbacks. And he was getting a little tired of hearing all about this. So he asked the question, and it was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but it was not. The question was not, how long have you been a black quarterback? This was the question that he asked with He said there were about 8 or 9 players and 50 to 60 writers or other journalists in the room when he asked the question. He was standing right next to Doug Williams, and people didn't necessarily hear this, but this was the question. So, Doug, it's obvious that you've been a black quarterback for some time. When did it start to matter? That is a legitimate question, and it's a question that nobody else asked, and it's a smart question. When did it start to matter? You've been a black quarterback for quite some time. That was sort of tongue-in-cheek. Of course he's been a black quarterback for some time. He's been a black quarterback ever since he played in high school. He's been black since he was born. Understand this. There's a little bit of sarcasm attached, but the question was not, how long have you been a black quarterback? It's, you've been a black quarterback for some time. When did it start to matter? Now, off of that, there was a note that was put in the local San Diego paper. I think it's the San Diego Union Tribune. Just a little small note. Hey, how about this question? And it's a question that somebody picked up second or third hand and just put it out there. There was no, and nowadays, if in fact that question was asked, somebody would have tweeted it out right away from the news conference and it would have gone crazy. Oh my God, what an idiot question. But that was not an idiot question. That was a real question. And so this became attached to Butch John for some time. Unfortunately, he had some real health issues, which Doug alluded to there. He had to leave writing in 2002 and passed away a few years after that. But, what continues to be put out there, not just by Doug Williams, but others, this stupid question was asked. It's unfair to a man who is an actual journalist, asked, I think, a very good question. And because of the nature of what happens at these Super Bowls where you have, 300 people covering the game, and the game, it's basically a game of telephone tag that goes on here, and the quote gets garbled, and it winds up in a paper that everybody's reading because there's no internet in 1988. So the way you caught up with what was going on while you're at the Super Bowl, did this for years. You pick up the local paper, and you pick up USA Today, and sometimes they would truck in I guess the Washington Post showed up there, and the Denver Post or Denver whatever papers were there, and that's how you did it. So this was an unfair thing, and here we are all these years later. The game was played in 1988. It's 2024, and Doug Williams is still talking about a question that actually wasn't asked. And it may not even be his fault. He may not remember what was said. It was just, as it became a big story. Yeah, so how about that? Somebody asked me how long I've been a black quarterback. That was not the question that was asked. I hope that clears that up a little bit. Monty Kiffin has passed away at the age of 84, famous for designing the Tampa 2 defense. His son, of course, is Lane Kiffin, who's now the coach at Ole Miss, and he was with Tony Dungy and John Gruden, part of that Super Bowl team with Tampa in 2002. He worked a lot of different places, and fortunately, Richie Pettibone is still alive, but I would put Monty Kiffin and Richie Pettibone in this category. They are two of the greatest defensive coordinators of all time. I don't think Kiffin ever got a shot to be a head coach. Richie had it for only 1 year here, but those are guys who had Hall of Fame talent in what they did. I mean, there's no arguing how great they were, and both of them constructing Super Bowl championship teams or helping a big part of it. Look, when Joe Gibbs was here and he had Richie the whole time his first go-round, he said, I'll coach the offense, you coach the defense. He stayed out of Richie's way. And I think Monty Kiffin had the same, although Tony Dungy was a defensive guy, Gruden was an offensive guy, but they both said, we'll oversee it, but you're the guy. You're the guy running the defense. So very sad, Monty Kiffin passing away at the age of 84. And finally, before I scoot out of here, this is one of the weirdest stories I've seen in a long time. There's a track athlete who actually grew up in the United States, but because of relatives is competing for, I don't even know if I can pronounce the African country. It's Surinam. Suriname, I guess is what it is. Suriname is the name of the country. And he's a 19-year-old sprinter. And he claims that the Gatorade recovery gummies that he was given, like in a gift basket, after he competed in a race, caused him to test positive for the banned substance GW1516, which led to a 4-year ban and stripped him of his record. He set the record for under 20 in the 100 meters and is now not being allowed to compete. He has filed a lawsuit and according to it, is seeking to recoup what they say is millions of dollars that he lost in economic opportunities, as well as compensation for the devastating emotional harm that he has suffered. He has been competing, attends Texas A&M, and Gatorade had named him its 2023 Florida Boys Track and Field Player of the Year, invited him to a July 11th ceremony in Los Angeles. A month before the ceremony, he took a drug test, came back clean, but then took another one. Look, you hear about these things being blamed all the time on supplements, over-the-counter supplements. I've never heard about this for an over-the-counter gummy. Who knows? There's a very good 30 for 30 that I just watched. I forget the athlete who was banned in 1988 from competing and tried to clear his name, and it was clear that the world governing body of this just totally mishandled this. The sample was tainted, and there was all kinds of things that went on with this. But here's Gatorade being drawn into this. Now, gummies, I've never taken one, but I understand it's kind of like a legal form of marijuana or something like that. Chris Russo always jokes about taking gummies. Who knows what's going on with this? But this 4-year ban for somebody who's looking to compete, I guess he can get his eligibility back and compete in the Olympics again the next time in 2028. But man, that's a bummer. And his name is Isam Asinga, banned for 4 years, stripped of his world record in the 100 meters for under 20. Ooh, kind of a downer as we head into the weekend and head into vacation for me. But hope you stay cool next week. I will try to do the same. Tony is coming up next, and I will see you a week from Monday at 9 a.m.